The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house. It was a peaceful, almost sacred silence, the kind that only settles in after a long, fulfilling day. I stood at the kitchen island, wiping down the granite countertop for the third time, not because it was dirty, but because the motion was soothing. From the living room, I could hear the faint, comforting sounds of a baseball game on TV and the occasional rustle of my husband, Mark, turning the page of his newspaper. It was a portrait of a perfect, ordinary Friday night. My name is Laura. For 47 years, I've built my life on the foundation of this ordinary. Mark and I met in college, two shy business majors who found courage in each other's quiet company. We built a life, a successful hardware store that was a local fixture, and a home filled with love. The only thing that ever cast a shadow over our happiness was the emptiness in the rooms we'd hoped to fill with children. Years of trying, of tests and quiet disappointments, led us to foster care. It wasn't a second choice, it was a calling born from a different kind of love. That's how Liam came into our lives. He was 10, a boy with eyes that held storms and a silence that spoke volumes of a past no child should have. He'd been in the system for 2 years, shuffled between homes. The first month, he was a ghost in our house, tiptoeing around, flinching at sudden movements. We poured patience and consistency into him, like watering a parched plant. Slowly, the ghost became a boy. He started laughing at Mark's corny jokes, he began leaving his muddy sneakers by the door, and he even started calling me, Mom, once, by accident, before blushing and correcting himself. That single, stumbled word had felt like the sun breaking through clouds after a decade of rain. He was 17 now, tall and lanky, with a passion for basketball and video games that he shared enthusiastically with Mark. Our family, though stitched together by paperwork and hope, felt as real and as strong as any bound by blood. I finished wiping the counter and decided to take a glass of water up to Liam. He'd been in his room for a few hours, supposedly working on a history paper. His light was still on, spilling a yellow wedge into the dark hallway. I padded softly down the hall, not wanting to disturb him if he was in a flow state. But his door was slightly ajar. I could hear the rapid, rhythmic clicking of a computer mouse, not the slow, thoughtful taps of essay writing. I smiled to myself, probably sneaking in a game of whatever that new shooter was he and his friends were obsessed with. I'd just leave the water on his desk with a gentle reminder about his bedtime. I pushed the door open quietly. Liam, I brought you some. The words died in my throat. He wasn't facing his computer monitor. He was angled slightly away, his back mostly to me, his body hunched intently over his laptop. On the screen, illuminated in the dim glow of his desk lamp, was a video call. And on the other side of that call was a face I knew as well as my own. It was Mark, my husband of 25 years. The man who snored softly beside me every night, who held my hand during scary movies, who fixed my car and packed my lunch. But this wasn't that Mark. This Mark was shirtless. His face, usually creased with the gentle lines of age and laughter, was twisted into an expression I had never seen before, a leering, unfamiliar mask of raw lust. He was saying things, his voice a low, intimate purr that was meant for a lover's ear, not a son's. And Liam was mirroring him. His t-shirt was off, discarded on the floor. His young face, usually so open and trusting, was flushed, his eyes glazed with a disturbing mix of admiration and desire. He was playing along, responding to Mark's whispered words with a shy, complicit smile. The world didn't slow down. It didn't shatter. It simply folded in on itself, collapsing into a single, horrifying point of reality. The glass of water slipped from my hand. It hit the plush carpet with a dull, muted thud, the water spreading a dark, shapeless stain, but the sound was deafening in the silence of my soul. Both of them froze. Liam's head whipped around, his eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. On the screen, Mark's face went from lustful to ashen in a heartbeat. The mask of the predator vanished, replaced by the panicked look of a man caught in the act. Laura, he gasped, his voice tinny and small from the laptop speaker. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt like they were filled with concrete. I just stared, my gaze darting from my foster son's terrified face to my husband's guilty one on the screen. The pieces, jagged and poisonous, began to click into place in my mind. The late nights at the store. The business trips that always seemed to coincide with Liam's school breaks. The way Mark always volunteered to help Liam with his homework, shutting the door to his room. The extra affection, the gifts, the secretive jokes I'd dismissed as guy stuff. It wasn't fatherly love, it was grooming, It was predation. It was a betrayal so profound it felt like the floor had vanished from beneath my feet. "Mom, I can explain," Liam started, his voice a trembling whisper. But I was already backing away. My body was moving on autopilot, a primal flight response taking over. I shook my head, a frantic, jerky motion. No, there was no explanation. There were no words in any language that could coat this horror in something palatable. I stumbled out of the room, down the hall, my hand skimming the wall for support. I heard Mark's frantic voice calling my name from the laptop, now distant and irrelevant. I made it to the top of the stairs just as I heard the front door open and close. Mark. He must have sprinted from the living room, having heard the commotion through the call. "Laura, what happened?" Liam texted me, "He said you were upset." His voice was a perfect imitation of concern as he reached the foot of the stairs. He looked up at me, his face a carefully constructed mask of confusion and worry. The same face that had just been leering at a child on a computer screen. The sight of him, standing there in our home, pretending, unleashed something inside me. The concrete in my lungs turned to fire. "I saw you," I whispered, my voice hoarse and broken. His facade cracked. Just for a second, I saw the panic in his eyes before he tried to reassemble it. "Saw what, honey? What are you talking about? Were you and Liam fighting?" "Don't," I snarled, the sound foreign and guttural. "Don't you dare. I saw you. On the video call. With him." The mask crumbled completely. His shoulders slumped, and he looked down, unable to meet my gaze. The silence that followed was heavier and more damning than any confession. I don't remember the rest of the night clearly. It exists in my memory as a series of shattered images and sounds. Me, packing a bag with trembling hands. Mark, following me from room to room, his pleas a desperate, whining noise. It wasn't what it looked like. It just happened. "Laura, please, we can fix this." He came on to me. That last lie was the final nail. To not only commit this atrocity but to then blame the child, the victim. The man I had loved, the man I had built a life with, was a stranger. A monster hiding in the skin of the man I trusted most. I drove to a hotel that night, the streets a blur of neon and tears. I checked into a sterile, anonymous room and collapsed on the bed, the sobs finally racking my body. I cried for the life I thought I had. I cried for the future I had dreamed of with Liam, watching him graduate, get married, have children of his own. I cried for the boy, my boy, who had been so brutally violated by the one person who was supposed to protect him. The days that followed were a numb, procedural hell. I called our caseworker from the foster agency, my voice flat and robotic as I reported what I had witnessed. The woman on the other end of the line was silent for a long moment before uttering a quiet, "Oh, my God." She assured me they would launch an immediate investigation and that Liam would be moved to a temporary placement. The word, placement, felt so cold, so clinical, for a child whose world had just been obliterated. I retained a lawyer. I filed for divorce. Mark, faced with the undeniable evidence and the legal ramifications, eventually stopped pleading and retreated behind his own lawyer. His calls and texts became about asset division and the hardware store, the life we built reduced to a list of properties to be split. But through it all, one thought haunted me more than any other: Liam. My anger at him, the initial shock and sense of betrayal from his participation, had quickly been eclipsed by a crushing, maternal grief. He was a child, a vulnerable, damaged child who had been systematically manipulated and abused by a master manipulator. Mark had given him attention, affection, and a twisted sense of specialness, exploiting the deep-seated need for a father figure that had been left by every man who had ever abandoned him. How could he have possibly understood the boundaries being crossed? How could he have said no to the man who held his entire future, his home, his family, his stability, in his hands? I wanted to see him. I needed to see him. I needed him to know that I did not blame him, that I still loved him, that the mother in me had not died in that horrific moment. It took weeks to arrange. His temporary foster parents, a kind and cautious older couple, were initially hesitant. They were protecting him, and I couldn't blame them. But after speaking with his therapist and the caseworker, they agreed to a supervised meeting at a neutral location, a quiet park. The day was unfairly beautiful. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and the air was warm. I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting on a bench by the duck pond, looking thinner, his shoulders hunched. He looked so young, so lost. My heart broke all over again. I sat down next to him, leaving a careful space between us. For a long time, we just watched the ducks paddle in the murky water. Hi, Mom, he finally whispered, his voice thick with tears. That one word, Mom, shattered the last of my defenses. Tears streamed down my face freely. Hi, baby, I'm so sorry, he choked out, staring intently at his hands. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to stop it. He said if I told anyone, they would take me away from you. He said you wouldn't understand, that it was our special secret. He said you'd get angry and send me back. The pieces clicked into their final, horrifying place. The manipulation was so calculated, so evil. Mark had used my love for Liam, and Liam's love for me, as the ultimate weapon to ensure his silence. Liam, look at me, I said, my voice firm despite the tears. He slowly raised his tear-streaked face. You have nothing to be sorry for. Do you understand me? You are the child, he was the adult. What he did to you was wrong. It was a crime. It was abuse. You are not to blame. Not for one single second of it. The relief that washed over his face was so profound it was painful to witness. He crumpled then, his body folding into sobs. I moved closer and wrapped my arms around him, holding him tight as he cried into my shoulder. I held my son, my poor, broken boy, and I let him cry for everything he had lost, for the trust that had been stolen, for the innocence that had been ripped away. We talked for over an hour. He told me, in halting, painful sentences, how it had started. A pat on the back that lingered too long. Accidental touches, compliments that slowly became more personal, more intimate. Then the secret texts, the hidden chats, the gifts that came with conditions. Mark had been a patient hunter, building a cage around Liam, one manipulated emotion at a time. That meeting in the park was a turning point. The divorce proceedings continued, a cold and bitter process. Mark fought dirty, trying to drag my name through the mud, claiming I was an unfit partner, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. In the end, he lost everything. The business was sold, the house was sold, and he moved to another state, a pariah. The legal system took its course, and he faced consequences for his actions, a small, cold comfort in the face of the devastation he left behind. But a new story began for Liam and me. With the full support of his therapist and the foster agency, I began the process of becoming his foster mother again. It was a long road, filled with home visits, family therapy sessions, and a lot of hard, emotional work. We had to build a new relationship, one not based on the lie we had lived in before, but on the raw, painful truth. We had to learn to trust again, to feel safe again. It's been 2 years now. Liam is 19, he graduated high school and is taking classes at the local community college. We live in a small apartment that smells of his overcooked pasta and my attempts at gardening. It's not the life I expected. The pictures on the walls are different, the family routines are new, and the shadow of what happened will always be a part of us, a scar on our history. But it is a life built on truth. Some nights, Liam still has nightmares. Sometimes, I see a flicker of fear in his eyes when a man raises his voice. We are both healing, slowly, together. He calls me, Mom, now, without a trace of hesitation. And when he does, I am reminded that family isn't always about the picture-perfect story you plan for. Sometimes, it's about who stays and fights for you in the wreckage. It's about choosing to love, fiercely and protectively, even when the world has shown you its darkest face. I never expected to see what I saw that night. It was a vision from my worst nightmare. But from that ashes of that nightmare, a different, stronger, and more honest love was born. A love that was tested by fire and, against all odds, survived.